Even with there only being 2 months since the release of Resident Evil 4 Remake, countless speedrunners have combined forces to bring the game all the way down to 1 hour and 48 minutes on the professional difficulty. With that being said, it's nowhere near as optimized or as solidified as the original. That has been cooking for about 18 years now. The game is pretty much well done at this point, but it's been just long enough that we can have some fun comparing and contrasting the two speedruns to see how the changes in each game affect the speedrun. And there's no better way to compare and contrast these two excellent speed games than by speedrunning them both at the same time. How does that help to compare them? I don't know either, but it sounded like a great video idea, so here we are. The rules are simple. The timer starts when I start either game. I have to complete a new game professional speedrun for both the remake and original at the same time. Once both runs are completed, the timer ends. I am not going to be allowed to pause the game or open a menu that freezes game time when I switch back and forth between games. I could use cutscenes or end mission screens though. I'm going to try to avoid that if at all possible. This run is going to be all about consistency and overlapping downtime. If there is an animation in the remake that takes 15 seconds, that's 15 seconds of free time for me to play the original. But because I can't pause the game, I can only switch when it's safe, unless I risk some absolute insane Mad Lad plays like this. Ah! Leave Ashley out of this. Oh, I needed her to buy a sadness. Trust me. Like you. I'm American. I didn't switch the camera correctly. I'm sorry. What's happening? I dodged a rocket off camera. That's the last one, right? yeah, okay, the last one is the button mash. Enough talk. Die, comrade. Oh, I'm gonna die to the fucking Ganados. I'm on fire! Get out of the fire! I start with the remake because its village bingo section is on a pretty tight global timer. I need to rush to give Granny her social security check, and if I'm too late, she'll turn around and aggro the whole village. This will ruin the whole strategy that is already not very consistent, hence starting with the remake. We need to kill 15 enemies to activate bingo time, and enemies in the remake have random enemy health. This is a problem because their range of random health very commonly gives them the possibility to survive a hand grenade. So even when we draw a bunch of enemies together and then toss a grenade, sometimes no one at all will die. But we need to kill at least 7 to get extra enemy spawns that we need for the second grenade to kill the other 8 for 15 total kills. I have to finish off a few enemies to get 7 kills, but I can tell when I did because the newly spawned enemies will run in from around the corner by the chainsaw house. Okay, I think I got 7. That's my cue to enter the house to grab the shotgun and the grenade, kill one dude as he climbs up the ladder, then go out to the roof and throw a grenade. Hopefully, this gets me to 15 kills. This by itself is almost never enough though. I usually have to finish off a few with the shotgun. Yeah, that's definitely 7. Alright, we're good. Let's go! Bingo! Achieved! But once I hear bingo, I run inside to collect a first aid spray and then quickly start the original game. OG RE4's village is also on a global timer, but this one only starts when you enter that room. Since every room in the game is independent of one another in the original, it's going to have way more safe spots to be able to switch and play the other game. This is convenient because OG RE4 is also way shorter than the remake, meaning most of the time we'll be playing the remake. Once I do make it to the village though, the strat is quite similar here, except there is no RNG health on the Ganados. By killing the first villager from a certain spot, we can trigger more enemy spawns from behind. Those guys spawn in when we enter the shotgun house. Then we throw a grenade through the window to get 7 kills, triggering even more enemies. Once we grab another grenade and the shotgun, we jump outside and throw one more grenade to get the rest of the 15 kills, using the invincibility frames from the fence to not take damage. A consistent strategy that in the OG basically never fails. Unlike the remake that works maybe 60% of the time. The way this works exactly is I just have both games open in the same monitor, in the windowed mode. Then I tab from one game to the other so they can continue running in the background. The real speedrun is trying to beat both games before my computer catches on fire. Remake is going to take priority here most of the time during this run, because not only is the run a lot longer, but it's also a lot more volatile. If you die on professional difficulty, you have to reload from a save, meaning some spots could be potentially devastatingly large time losses if I haven't saved and I die. Unlike the original, where if you accidentally knock on the wrong person's door and they shoot you, you're looking at a respawn timer instead of a load screen. This means the consequences for dying in the OG are minimal, so if all else fails, we sacrifice the OG. I did 2 speedruns like this, and the first time I had no idea where things would overlap. Optimization. Animation playing. But I can't skip, better switch games. See, that right there, that's how you save time. That 3-second animation that you can't skip, where the gate goes up, that's when I moved 2 feet in OG RE4. But by the second run, I had quite a good idea of where I could save the most time by overlapping certain sections. The first room in Chapter 1-2 in the original is on a global timer, and by doing Remake first, I completely screwed my timing for the OG, making every enemy be in a different spot than normal. Oh god, but I sat still for too long and now the enemies are all in weird spots. That's not where you're supposed to be at all. The very same room in the Remake is insanely brutal. The dynamite can instantly kill you, and most of the time, there's nothing you can do about it. But I make my way through on the first try. Oh my god. Bob and weave, bob and weave. I don't know who Bob is, but I know who Weave is. It's a lot harder to find places to stall in the Remake, because in the Remake, enemies can follow you from room to room, where in the original, they can't go through load screens. One of the biggest differences between these two games is definitely the economy. Inflation has hit the merchant hard, and rocket prices have skyrocketed. In the original, you can grab 3 treasures that take a total of 5 seconds to grab, and boom, you have enough for a rocket. Only 30,000. But in the Remake, we have to grab many more treasures and spend $160,000 to get a rocket launcher that we would need. Needless to say, we won't be using one for Gigante in the Remake. But even before Del Lago, the original is packing heat. By the second merchant in the game, the original sells some treasures and buys a rocket launcher. This will definitely be used for Gigante. But before we can get there, we have to do the iconic Del Lago boss fight. I used some downtime on the pouring animation to get a bit of movement going in the original. This is one of the few rooms in the Remake where I am completely safe, so I catch up with the original here, so I could do Del Lago in the original first, because Del Lago in the original is super fucking random. I wanted to get any potential failures for this run out of the way as soon as possible, and with the original Del Lago being random, it seemed like a no-brainer that I would do that one first. In the original, he dies in only 12 harpoons, but by the time you throw the 7th harpoon, he has a 1/3 chance to dive and force a 20-second waiting period. This happened in my run. You know, I should have done Remake first, because if I get an early dive, I have like 10 to 15 seconds of downtime. The Remake, on the other hand, has a completely consistent fight. It takes many more harpoons to kill Del Lago, but his pathing is 100% consistent, and you never have to worry about missing a 1 cycle unless you miss lots of harpoons. It's a lot more technical though. Moving the boat and aiming at the same time adds a lot of depth to the fight, and if you let go of the aiming harpoon button between throws, you can throw harpoons a lot faster than normal. Not to mention, mouth hits actually do more damage than body hits. All of these things were not present in the original. I also capped my frame rate to 60 FPS for this fight in the Remake, and that's because the Remake's water is tied to frame rate. The higher the FPS, the higher the waves, and these harpoons that Leon throws are made of cotton candy. So if they even touch a tiny bit of water, they just instantly disintegrate. This isn't a problem in the original, as you literally can't play the game higher than 60 FPS. Chapter 4 in the Remake is the best part to get lots of progress in the original. Because we are riding the boat around the map, there are lots of times where we get on and off the boat. This boat animation is like 10 seconds long, giving us the perfect time to make some progress in the OG. This entire section of the Remake doesn't exist in the original. Instead, we shoot some boxes out of the sky and use them to jump across the water and turn off the waterfall. At this point, we basically just run past everything and make our way to Gigante so we can blow them into little ogre bits. In the Remake, on the other hand, this section is one of the more important parts of the run, as we're collecting lots of treasures to sell to the merchant, not to mention collecting side quests and the golden egg so that we can use it on the Salazar boss fight much later in the speedrun. On every ladder climb, boat ride, and door transition, there is a small opportunity to make progress in the opposite game. OG RE4 destroys Gigante with a rocket, but since it's so much more expensive in the remake, we have to have a different approach here. We instead buy the bolt-action rifle, a gun you would never ever use in the original, and upgrade its firepower 3 times, its capacity 2 times, and its reload speed once. With this, we can then create a nice little 2-cycle for the El Gigante boss fight, stunning him in place with a grenade. The fight here is much harder, and because if you die on Pro in the remake, you have to load a save, it's a lot scarier too. In fact, every room is a lot scarier in the remake because of this. By the time I have saved Ashley in the OG, I am just now getting to Gigante in the remake, and we're only about 44 minutes into the run. We're good. In the original, Ashley follows right by Leon, as close as she can, always on camera and consistent. But in the remake, she can be really far behind. So far, in fact, that you can lose track of her super easily. To top it all off, her pathing is essentially random, so there's no guarantees how she's gonna navigate any particular room. This is why we're gonna do a trick to get rid of Ashley. Dude, what? Well, not that trick. A different trick, and unfortunately it only works for this section. In the original, you could just have good movement to completely avoid all enemies until the cabin, even with Ashley. But in the remake, a little bit of cheating is the best way forward. By pushing Leon's hitbox into the wall while aiming at the ground with the sniper, we can then jump down the ladder through the wall. This leaves Ashley in the church where she will not follow us. Once you arrive at the cabin though, she's gonna teleport to you. Now for the cabin. In both the remake and the original, cabin is one of the hardest parts of the run. The original has a kill count of 40 enemies that needs to be met to end the sequence, while the remake is a bit more nuanced. OG starts off with a really consistent luring enemies inside and then stopping Lewis from knocking them out the window. So you could then get the max amount of kills possible from our hand grenades. That's gonna hit me. Oh. Then once we run out of grenades, we go on the stairs and use the shotgun to blast away until the cabin ends. Fuck you. There's a lot of random elements here, like Plaga spawns and shotgun crits, but unless you get super boned, it should be fine. At least as long as you remember it's the OG and don't try to parry. I just tried to parry. Tyler Perry's House of Parrying. The remake cabin is completely different. We sold the shotgun, so we can't use that, but we have lots of rifle ammo. After killing 7 enemies, a group will spawn in and rush you. By nading them 2 times, we can kill enough enemies so that the next 3 will drop boards to board up the windows. Once all 3 windows are boarded up, the second phase will spawn, signified by the ladder cutscene. Then we have to kill 5 enemies, and this causes Utters to spawn. Once he is killed, the cabin ends. God, that was so fucking cringe. Now it's time for the comment of the day. Every video, we take one comment from my previous video and answer the comment or question in the next. This time we have a comment from Warren Valion, who says, do you ever play games to just have fun playing through a game, or is every game that you play inherently for speedrunning purposes? And if it is, are you just not capable of both liking a game and not speedrunning it? I'm really curious about the deep dive into the mind of a speedrunner. Well, this question is actually kind of funny, but I want to expand on it a bit here. I do play games casually. In fact, every game I speedrun because my casual experience was so good that I wanted to master the game's mechanics beyond what a normal playthrough asks of you. Nowadays, content creation is my job, so I don't play very many games outside of that context. And if you've ever talked to anyone who's turned a hobby into a job, they'll tell you it changes that hobby for you and makes it hard to separate the hobby from the job again. But I regularly play games outside of speedrunning. Just normally I do this because I'm looking for something that I think will be good content in the speedrunning context. I don't try to speedrun them on my first playthrough or anything, but I'll often watch the speedrun first and decide to pick up the game casually because the speedrun is good. Then if I enjoy the casual experience enough, I'll pick it up as a speedrun. As far as games I play for pure enjoyment outside of trying to speedrun them in any context, really no. Just one, CSGO. And I'm not going to be speedrunning that for obvious reasons. But when Counter-Strike 2 comes out, you bet your ass I'm going to be making some content for it. As far as not being capable of liking a game and speedrunning it, I certainly can. It's just that if I like a game, I'm often going to want to speedrun it, so I can just financially justify playing it more than once. Some gamers can't play games normally after they learn a speedrun for that game, but that doesn't apply to me. I can boot up good old RE4 and do a casual playthrough, willingly ignoring all sorts of speedrun tech and routing, just to have a plain old good time. But not everyone can. Thanks for the comment, and make sure to leave one if you had a question too. Back to the 2-game speedrun. Once cabin is over, there is a choice for which path to take in the original. This choice for the speedrun is always the right path, because the Gigante fight there is optional. You can just run past and grab the key to leave, sending you straight to the gondola section and the Mendez boss fight. But in the remake, there is no such choice. You have to do the Bella Sister fight. Here we buy the riot gun, something you would also never see in an OG RE4 speedrun, as well as the flash crafting recipe and a case upgrade, something that you never get in the OG either. Then we run through this new section called Cancer Canyon that is pure hell. Once through it, we fight the Bella Sisters, who are one of the biggest reset points in the whole speedrun. They're very tanky and can instantly kill you. Not to mention, you have to slowly crank open a door to escape. Flashes are your friend here in the remake. I pressed space, it was too late though. Fortunate. After escaping though, the big cheese chases you down and confronts you in the barn. Or well, he would if we didn't just clip through a wall by talking to the merchant. Skipping this boss fight leaves Stinky Cheese just vibing in the area afterwards, wondering why you never showed up to the fight. How nice of Leon to spare him though. Mendez in the original is not so lucky, although he's not much harder than just skipping him in the remake. OG Mendez is weak to fire, so by throwing 3 well-placed fire grenades, you can instantly kill him, making the fight not much harder than Remake's skip. My pace is really solid, arriving at the castle in both games at about 1 hour and 10 minutes. This is where things are going to get a little bit crazy for both games though. In the remake, we already have everything we need, so we're just going to keep on trucking. But in the original, we have to make a pit stop at the merchant. We sell everything and get the auto rifle, TMP, and another rocket. This is then used to kill one enemy, then we just movement our way through the catapult room and despawn all of the enemies by shooting the cannon. This gives us some great downtime to play the remake, where we do something similar, shooting like 5 enemies and then making our way to the cannon. Unfortunately, the enemies don't despawn in the remake though, so we have to fight our way out. Between cannon shots, I have to wait for the recharge, so I inch my way to the catapult room in the OG in the meantime. The remake then has a skip where you place Leon's hitbox inside a door with a sniper rifle like before in Chapter 5 with Ashley. But this time, instead of jumping down a ladder, we use it to turn around quickly and open the door from the wrong side, clipping Leon through the wall and skipping the Gyarados fight. Hell yeah, first try. Waterhall is one of the longest sections of uninterrupted gameplay for both games. In the brief downtime of lifting up Ashley in the remake, I do the sword puzzle room in the original. Then I switch back and perform the second half of Waterhall, where I hit some sick collaterals to save Ashley. Then after beating the room, there is a lot of downtime while Ashley opens a door, so I get through Waterhall in the OG then. But I first have to kill the Gyarados that I skipped in the remake. He's no threat in the OG though. My sick quickscope skills make sure he goes down fast. Waterhall in the original is actually more difficult in my opinion. It requires a lot less luck, but a lot more skill. The TMP is insanely useful here, because enemies consistently stun on shot. It can be kicked consistently, so you can get yourself out of almost any sticky situation with enough skill and know-how. Unlike the remake, where it's more about having the right resources at your disposal at the time and proactively avoiding confrontation by having proper planning. The second phase in particular is a lot easier though, because the enemy movements are super consistent and you can hit even sicker collateral sniper shots. Not that I do so in my run because I'm a little bit washed, but you know. It turns out though, Remake and OG Leon are both completely incompetent, because they both lose Ashley in the same exact spot. At least there's some justification as for why in the remake. The remake also has a new room where you fight the Red Zealot. This is basically the equivalent of the Gatling gun room in the OG. It's then followed immediately by a completely new section where you run across the battlements of a castle. There is a lot of intended skips here, and Gigante throws some boulders at you. But for the most part, it's pretty free. The original is anything but free though. These next few rooms are super brutal, especially on the random front. There is the Novicidor's room that is very random, followed by the aforementioned Gatling gun room that is consistent, but is immediately preceded by the gallery, one of the most random rooms in the game. I don't think I got that. No, I didn't. fine. Backup threats. While the remake generally has more potential to stun lock you to death in multiple hits, with the unupgraded health in OGRE4, many enemies can instantly kill you if you have even 1 HP less than 100%, like the Scythe enemies for instance. Both games arrive at the hedge maze at the same time. The original is completely free. You just run through while looking at the sky and the dogs literally can't hit you. In the remake, however, this is one of the hardest sections of the game. The dogs are much more proactive and, unlike you, have finally overcome their social anxiety, so they don't get upset if you make eye contact. They're just upset all the time. Backwards progress is still progress. We get Ashley back a little bit earlier in the remake. Hooray! Then we do some parts of the remake that can be excruciatingly painful. The goat head room that, if you don't hit the skip, becomes one of the most broken rooms in the game. Followed by the night room, where Ashley is actually useful for once, but the knights do so much damage, it's crazy. Ashley. Ashley! Throw the fucking lamp, you dumb bitch! Thank you. Meanwhile, in the original, the Ashley section in the original is much shorter and less involved, which personally I kinda like. The remake section has more than one puzzle. Gross! These two Ashley sections have some of the most downtime of any parts in the run, so I switch a lot here. At least in the remake section, there are a ton of elevators and whatnot. Just make sure to remember to actually switch back in time before Ashley gets her ass blasted by a white knight. Always remember, the white knights aren't actually your friends. When your guard is down, you've just broken up with your boyfriend, that is when they're gonna attack. At your lowest point, when you're most vulnerable. No, 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 no. After I beat Ashley's section in the remake, I make a pit stop at the merchant to sell some wares and buy some heavy grenade crafting recipes, as well as a lot of gunpowder. These Gyarados won't explode themselves after all. We then run through the Novi's section while riding minecarts in the original, then dump a bunch of heavy grenades on the Gyarados, taking us to Novi's and Verdugo. This is when we fight the knights in the OG, who are very consistent and pretty straightforward. That seems to be a theme in this run. The original is a lot more consistent and straightforward, where the remake was a lot more luck-based and obtuse. Speaking of obtuse, I go out of bounds in the Novi's section so I can play the original without having to worry about being grabbed. Then, once I'm back in the remake, I run back out of bounds to collect my crown, then head into the Verdugo merchant. This is where we buy the rocket launcher and the TMP. We box the shotgun and sell the crafted crown, as well as buying the broken butterfly. I'm making a lot more progress in the remake, but this is good because the game is also a lot longer. Finally, having a rocket launcher, we can do the things that the OG has had the privilege of doing since the beginning, and that's cheesing the shit out of the bosses. Verdugo dies in one rocket, but we want to use this rocket a few times. That's when we do the infinite ammo rocket glitch. The name is a bit misleading, so I'll explain it in detail. By getting hit by the frost effect and switching weapons at the right timing, you can confuse the game into thinking that you have the TMP equipped when you actually have the rocket equipped. When done correctly, you'll be able to shoot the rocket without losing it. This consumes CMP ammo instead of rocket ammo. Insanely broken tech, I assure you. Fortunately, it doesn't completely trivialize the rest of the game, because similar to the Dipman glitch in the original, it has a lot of limitations. It can only be done in sections where ice or fire effects can cause Leon to do this stumbling animation. It also takes a long time to set up, and if you get hit, open the inventory, or interact with basically anything, the glitch goes away. So essentially what it lets us do here is shoot Verdugo with 2 rockets, and still keep our rocket afterwards. This rocket is then used again in the future without having to buy an additional run. Meanwhile, in the original, Novi's 2 are still terrible, but at least goes pretty well in this run. The OG run has far more money, and that money goes a lot further. Similar to the remake, the double Gyarados are not worth fighting legit, so they just get ass blasted by a rocket launcher. While on my way to Verdugo, I slowly walk there while climbing the ladders in the OG. The OG doesn't get any fancy rocket duplication glitch, but at this same point, it does get its own iconic oversight. The Dipman glitch. By buying the striker from the merchant, we can now allow ourselves to increase the animation speed of every animation that Leon does by 1.5 times. This is done by interrupting the striker aiming animation with a gun switch. This is insanely powerful, obviously, and completely dominates the meta of the rest of the speedrun. But like the rocket glitch, it can only be used in niche circumstances. It goes away when you interact with anything, or get hit or heal. It also has to be reactivated in every room. It's not as powerful economically as the rocket launcher glitch in the remake, but it is much more powerful in the speed sense. The remake then arrives at the boulder room, and this is where we do the rocket glitch again to maintain our rocket while blowing up the wall. Come here, sir. Throw the Molotov, please. Then we use the next rocket for real this time on the double giant room. Running out of rockets to dupe now. Well, it's supposed to kill both the giants, but I was griefing and missed it in this run, so I had to run around in circles to get Lewis to tag the armored one so I could dunk him. I missed, but didn't hit it. There we go. Meanwhile, in the OG, we just use the power of economics to buy as many rockets as we want, and use them to blow up the wall. Then we use the Dipman glitch to skip the double giants by running a zip line through the wall. Now we arrive at the minecart section, which thankfully has a skip in the original, but in the remake, we just have to take the L and ride this thing for like literally 8 minutes. The worst part of this is that I actually can't play the OG very much during this section because you can die really easily in the minecart. Missing one track switch or one too many enemies will kill you, and on Pro, that's a pretty big deal. On my second run, I did not overlap the games well enough to adequately make use of this downtime. But in my first run, I walked to Verdugo during this section and bought my rocket launcher after killing him. What I did manage to squeeze into my second run though, was being able to do the start of Novi's 3 during the ending part of the first half of Minecart, since there's about 30 to 45 seconds of downtime there. Yell at me if I'm dying in Remake. I think I'll be fine though. Then, once I was safe, I started the second half, and during its downtime, I cranked the lever and made my way through the chainsaw guy room towards the minecart section. I almost died trying to do this though. Oh my god, I just made it. Yeah. Once I started the minecart skip in the OG, I got safely out of bounds where I could not get hurt, and I did Novi's 3 in the remake. Nothing can hurt me out here. Where the fuck did those Novies come from? I've never seen them before in my life. Then I stopped by the merchant to upgrade my knife for the Krauser QTE fight, followed by the Krauser fight and the remake's own elevator, which I used to finish the minecart skip. Then during another elevator in the OG, I sell my knife, rebuy it, and upgrade the broken butterfly twice in the remake. The remake's upgrade system is much more forgiving than the originals. In the remake, you get about 95% of your investment back when you sell a weapon that you upgraded. Because of this, you can dump money into upgrading something like the knife for a single boss fight, then get all of your money back with little time or money lost. In the OG, you would lose so much money doing it that way that it would never be worth it. Both games had the Salazar boss fight, but they'll approach it from a very different way. The original will use a rocket, and the remake can't afford one. So we have to improvise and use an egg instead. The golden egg we got in chapter 4 actually stuns Salazar and does 70% of his total health and damage. So, that followed by a clip of upgraded Broken Butterfly instantly kills him in one cycle. The elevator in the remake has some downtime, so I make some small progress in the original. But the Salazar hands room is on a timer, so I can't stop in the middle of that. At 2 hours and 55 minutes, I make it so both games are on Island. Island in the remake is a veritable gauntlet of hard tricks that can kill the run. Starting out with the mirror puzzle room that has a nade throw to get the archer to fall in the way of the turret. That kind of defeats the purpose of the thing. Then we run through a horde of single mothers, aka regenerators, and grab the key card that we need to progress. These sections can be cheesed by putting your hitbox inside of the wall with the sniper scope. The enemies can't path to you, they don't know where you are, so they just kind of stand around and watch you, I guess. In OG, we also skip the mirror puzzle room, but instead we do it by jumping out of bounds and then vaulting back in with a QTE. What's up, by Solly? Way better than yesterday, that's for sure. Once we save Ashley in the remake, there is about to be a ton of downtime. We skip nearly the entire chapter by sniper clipping past the wrecking ball and right to the lift. Doing this trick actually causes physical pain to my body. This lift has a ton of downtime, so we progress the OG a lot here. The OG has its own wrecking ball skip too. When we get to that room, you can do a trick where you throw the last flash grenade in your inventory, so the inventory says empty for your weapon. Then you aim your knife at Ashley at the edge of the jump down and hold the aim button. Then once you let go of knife, you keep holding aim. This will cause Ashley to think that you are aiming at her even though you have nothing equipped, so will stay in place even though you aren't looking or aiming at her. By doing this, you can walk over to the lever and pull it without spawning the enemies. This allows you to be on the other side of the wall when the enemies do spawn when you let go of the trigger. This allows you to wait out the gaps between the wrecking ball swings with no risk. This is kind of slow compared to the actual speedrun strat, but for this run it saves a ton of time because I can play the remake during these sections between the wrecking ball swings. I made it all the way to halfway through the final Krauser fight in this time. Unfortunately, I died a few times in the next room in the OG to the regenerators beating the shit out of Ashley. I guess they're just jealous she isn't a single mom or something. God, I fucking hate Ashley, you dumb bitch. Immediately following this, I got on the truck and tried to make it through the Krauser section before the enemies in the OG caught up to the truck. I wasn't able to because I didn't have a good enough Krauser fight in the remake, so they caught up and killed me in the original. But that's fine, it's much better to die in the original than it is to die in the remake. Nope, I was too slow, hesitated. I did manage to make it through the next section before my second attempt enemies arrived though. Then I subsequently killed Krauser during the midway point of the truck section. We're good. After surviving truck, remake arrives at the worst part of the game. And that is where the clip of the intro happened. Well, at least in the first run. I was not crazy enough to do that in the second run though. The second run, I did this whole section in the remake before starting the Krauser QTE. Then I did the movement for the section after Mike dies in the remake during the Krauser QTE of the original. Been a long time, comrade. After that, there is one more turret skip in the remake, and I'm done with it before the Krauser cutscene ends. So that trick is free. As goofy as the laser room in the original is, this carrying Ashley section is so much worse. I just stand here holding Ashley during the entirety of my U3 fight in the OG. This boss isn't in the remake, and he probably didn't even notice because he sucks. We give him what he deserves at least. The remake grabs the Killer 7 and upgrades that for the Krauser fight. And actually, the OG does the same thing, minus the upgrades. We don't use it on the final phase though because he is ultra weak to the knife and we can easily stun lock him in the corner with it. Then we do the worst part of the original game, 5-4. As bad as it is in the remake, I swear somehow it's way worse in the original. The devs did manage to make it better in the remake, but I wonder how good the game would be if they just didn't add it at all. It takes a whole 10 minutes for remake Leon to carry Ashley to the end of the hallway. Poor guy's arms must be so tired. Average Resident Evil viewer. Because OG RE4 has so much more downtime in late game, I basically finished the remake way earlier. After the Ashley carry, all that I have left is fighting Sadler. I buy one more rocket and I blast his first phase, instantly killing it. The second phase, I have to wait out the special rocket spawn, so I just play the OG and take some damage as the tentacles don't do very much. War Room in the OG is still pain and suffering though, made even more so by the added stress of watching the remake Leon in the corner getting his hentai debut. Once the special rocket drops, remake Leon has to run to the end and grab a jet ski to outrun the island's explosion. This is when I realized I had made a huge mistake. I accidentally overlapped the two games' escape sequences, both which are on timers. The remake obviously takes priority because if I die I'll have to redo the Sadler boss fight, but I wanted to do both without dying right now. During some animations I was able to make it to the jet ski in the OG and reload the checkpoint to spawn Ashley in with me. Then I got on the jet ski and made it back to the remake before it crashed. I then crashed the jet ski in the OG to restart the timer, but I had to switch while mid-air in the remake so I could respawn. I barely made it before the island exploded in the remake. Only a few seconds to spare. Yeah. Alright, we're good. After respawning, I did the jet ski in the original, no problemo. I was able to get both games finished in 3 hours and 45 minutes. Overall, this run was super interesting and fun. At least for me, it highlighted the differences of both runs really well. The remake is more about planning and resource management, as well as adapting to shit RNG. Where the OG is more about pure execution and improvisation in the actual moment-to-moment gameplay. They both had a considerable amount of downtime and had enough overlapping sections, so I was playing basically the same part of both games at the same time. There were a few moments where I would get confused when switching between games. I tried to craft flashes in the original a few times, and tried to parry once or twice as well. I would also often forget about tank controls when switching back to the OG and try to turn with my mouse. And when switching the other way around, I would often try to equip weapons by opening the inventory in the remake, when I didn't have to. For now, I would say I prefer the original speedrun just due to its increased consistency. But like I said earlier, it's had a lot of time to cook. So for the sake of the remake speedrun, I say, let them cook. Thanks so much for watching, I really appreciate it, and stay stylish.